Today, we're asking if offerings like managed cameras or selling connectivity are strategic plays or just distractions. We'll also peek behind the vendor curtain at strategies for acquisitions and dig into whether peer groups have a built in 3 to 4 year life cycle. Welcome to the Business of Tech Lounge, the live version of the Business of Tech podcast. It's Wednesday, July 23rd, 2025, and I'm Dave Sobel. We'll take questions and comments throughout the show, so please submit them in the chat. If you have a question, we will happily respond to it over the course of the conversation. Now, I want to thank Sales Builder, our Patreon sponsor, whose support makes this show possible. Focus on your IT sales workflow with the power of automation and visit them at salesbuilder.com. That's BUILDR.com. And a reminder, I am watching that chat. We'll take those questions. My guest today is one of the sharpest minds in the IT channel, Ryan Morris. As the founder and principal consultant at Morris Management Partners, Ryan has spent more than 25 years helping vendors and service providers align their go-to-market strategies and build stronger partner ecosystems. From software quality to AI disruption, Ryan doesn't just analyze trends, he challenges the industry to think bigger. And he's my co-host on the Killing It podcast and a longtime friend. Ryan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you much, Dave. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Well, you were the right man to mix it up a little bit this week because I kind of wanted to play with ideas in a bit of a way. And the first thing I was reacting to is I've kind of been noticing a lot of webinars and promotions on what I would call obscure offerings, right? Like someone who's saying like, hey, deliver a managed access control solution or deliver sell connectivity solutions, and it's co-sponsored with a large telecommunications firm. Or, a Reddit post recently asked specifically about like, should I roll managed IP cameras into my offering? And as the more I thought about like where I think the value in IT services delivery is, my first reaction was, well, it isn't there. right, because I kind of had to laugh and go like, I'm thinking the interesting areas are in AI workflows, process management. I've got my opinions on cybersecurity, but at least I'll recognize that, like, hey, compliance and cyber, I'll grant that it's a leading trend. When I see somebody talking about, hey, do we want to get into managed IP cameras? I look at that and say, like, is that a distraction? And I figured, like, I'd throw it to you and say, like, hey, how much of these are distractions?
See, I think I differ with a lot of people in the industry on this. I believe that in order to stay relevant and in order to stay profitable in this industry, there has to be a continuous investment in ongoing R&D for finding and then evaluating and then deploying and optimizing new technology solutions and related services within your portfolio, right? If you are the orthodoxy in the industry has always been we standardize our stack. We only work with clients who will accept our stack of technology. We only lock it down, and then we make sure that nothing changes so that we have minimum variability, minimum custom touch in that process, and the highest efficiency in service offerings. I get
Right?
all of that stuff, right? In production, that's exactly the right thing to do. But one step behind the production stuff, there has to be a wave of emerging offerings, whether that is legitimately emerging technologies like AI workflows, which I think are fascinating from an MSP's perspective, or just emerging for you and for your clients. The bottom line is, right, if you think of the ways that you can grow your business without getting distracted by everything, without trying to become jack of all trades, master of none, you can grow your business two ways, right? You can grow it by acquiring new customers or expanding with existing customers. Historically, the MSP model has looked at that second one and said, well, I will sell you everything, one big gig, right? Like everything is fixed, everything is included, and then the variability is based on the systems or the users or the profiles within the environment that I manage. Therefore, if the customer grows, then I go with them. My philosophy is Well, why not add something new and something interesting to your portfolio and make that cross-selling opportunity a viable way for you to grow your
Okay.
business? I have a lot of opinions about what fits and what doesn't, but it begins with that basic understanding of if you don't ever add anything new to your portfolio, there comes a real quick time where the customer goes, you know, thanks. You fixed it. We're good. Like you did it. We're
Right.
satisfied. Nothing else is broken. So why would I ever give you $1 more than I currently give you?
Now, so you and I are philosophically aligned here, right? Like this is what, and by the way, like we wrote a paper together, over a decade ago about exactly this idea. But in a way, what I kind of want to have a discussion about is almost that next level that you were just talking about. Because one of the things I also think, so we're talking in 2025. We've been doing this managed services thing. Let's go with at least 20 years, probably more depending on definition. And what I also have noticed is that every vendor has now gotten the rhythm of say these things to get managed services providers to attention. Make sure you talk about how you'll help them increase revenue. Make sure you talk about how you'll help them increase monthly recurring revenue, right? Make sure that you talk about that you are delivering value to the clients. Like literally, I actually kind of laugh and go, as to give a little insight to listeners, like I help them write copy for their ads on the Business of Tech. And one of the things I tell them is let's not say those things because everyone says that when you only have a few moments to deliver your value, perhaps not the same thing, right? So I kind of laugh and go, like, I'm seeing every vendor out there say, well, you should add us to your portfolio to deliver a managed recurring service around it. So, like, let's do that dive. Like, how do you look at that second bit? Like, which are candidates to become research to explore? And which ones should you ignore, particularly when the vendors are all leaning in saying, all of us will deliver recurring revenue for you?
See, I agree with you. Everybody says that, but there's a two-dimensional vector that you have to be able to evaluate. It all begins with the principle of adjacency. In other words, I currently do this set of things, and I have optimized, improved, and I am an expert in delivering this particular bucket. So the two dimensions that you have to ask are, well, what are the adjacent technologies that have a similar underlying platform of delivery expectations. That's why I think that cybersecurity is a very natural evolution for an MSP because the essential value proposition is not just that we are experts in cybersecurity, but that we are experts in 24/7, zero downtime, zero interruption, right? Like that's the thing that we can bring. So things that have a similar delivery profile adjacent to the existing technologies that you already deliver, that's a perfectly viable one step to grow your portfolio without getting too far afield. The second vector that you have to consider is adjacency to the customer, right? In other words, this customer that pays me to manage this network or this set of IT services and assets, they also inevitably consume a related piece of technology that also happens to fit within my delivery expertise. I think that is actually where I believe something like a managed IP camera, those things are only valuable if they're always on, if they're always verifiable. You can ping them at any time, validate that this is true and accurate images coming through, and then leading that into the physical security world, right? Like not just cybersecurity but physical security. 24/7 matters. Continuity and optimization, quality of service, these are the things that really matter to the customer. The key here is you got to pick a direction and go in that direction one at a time, right?
Okay.
If you're going to add managed IP contract on camera, do not simultaneously try to add cybersecurity because you're going in both directions and it's going to cause distractions. But that doesn't mean you can only go in that direction, right? If you add the IP cameras and then you continue going in that direction, you might get into managed PLCs on a
Right.
manufacturing floor. You might get into some of the OT type systems that are out there. Or you could go back in the IT direction, look at
Yeah.
cybersecurity, look at other components of that. You just have to pick one at a time, right? You can't try to do
Yeah.
expanding the customer and expanding the technology at the same time.
With a bit of an asterisk of, I suspect there are large enough providers that can do multiple research projects at once, but let's say for most viewers, assume that is not you.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah. It's literally the question is a group of humans who
yeah,
has a functional capability and responsibility to deliver a measurable service to a customer. If you've got two different teams covering geos, covering sizes,
yeah.
covering verticals, cool, knock yourself out. Each one of them should have an initiative.
Gotcha. Okay, so we're gonna go. I have a question, but I'm gonna let a listener bump me. Kyle has asked a question: what new innovations should we expect to see to emerge from the live session? I'm eager to see how AI transforms customer experience. So, in a way, like, right, the thinking I'm got right here is like, which are innovations that are top of mind, because I want to get a sense, like, to question, like, what are the ones that we're looking at right now that are lead candidates, without necessarily endorsing, but what are the ones that you're thinking about the most?
Yep, absolutely. And this is the thing. So I learned a principle years ago from Clay Christensen, who wrote The Innovator's Dilemma, The Innovator's Solution. Right? He pioneered a concept that he referred to as the three horizons of innovation. Reason number one is the things that I already offer, I can make them better, more effective, more resilient based on improving the technologies or the specific processes in what I do now. Horizon number two are the things that we are well aware of. They have been out there in the conversation for long enough, but they're not quite ready for prime time, but they are established, and we believe they're going to come out the other side of the hype curve, right? Innovation horizon number three is a question of those things that are bleeding edge, the really fascinating, the really killer topics that everybody wants to talk about. The key here, and what Clayton said, and what I advocate aggressively in business development, is that Horizon 3 is not yet ready for billability, and while you need to be doing R&D and you have to be staying relevant and current on the cutting edge, like, you don't want to be the one who says to your customer, I'm sorry, what do you mean, MCP and AI workflows? I don't know what you're talking about, right? You have to be on the cutting edge, but you can't bring Horizon 3 things into a steady state operation without causing chaos. It's just a fact of life.
Right.
That's why what you should be looking at are those things that you think, well, I mean, that's not the coolest thing in the world anymore because it's been talked about and established. That's what you ought to be adding immediately to your portfolio. And that's why I would go to things like connectivity and IP cameras, and that are very well established inside the cyberspace. The market knows about them. They believe and agree with us that they're valuable and worth professional attention. And then you can add them as a tier or as an expanded pod of offering in your managed engagements. Those things don't have to come into the core, like all you can eat, one single price, everything is included. You don't have to do it that way, but you do have to be systematic about the way you bring those things
Okay.
in. That's not going to be the bleeding
Mhm.
edge. So my controversial
Right.
take is, you and I are both fascinated with all of the AI workflows, the agentic AI, the multi-stack, multi-protocol applications that we can automate. I think that stuff is fascinating. You might want to do some consulting services around that. You might want to,
Right.
have a few lunch and learns and do some conversations to remind your customers that you are the one on the cutting edge. But don't put that stuff in your fixed priced offerings yet, because it's just
Mhm.
way too unformed.
So you and I are in alignment on there, but delightfully we get to disagree on something, because too often, like, have all these shows where everybody agrees. So you threw in connectivity, and actually, from my perspective, connectivity would fail the kinds of things that I'm interested in rolling in, because of almost the lens you didn't include in the matrix, and I'd like to get your take on it. The closer something is to commodity, the less interested I am in it, right? So while I understand, like, hey, there's some, like, I need to make sure that I'm involved with the connectivity. I don't want the customer to, like, not have good internet and such. I also look at it and go, yeah, there's no money to be made there, right? Like, in terms of, like, I'm not going to be, me recommending one large telco provider over another large telco provider likely has squeezed so much margin out of that there's nothing left for me. Yes, I've got to figure out the perspective of like I have to deliver services on top of that, but ultimately I don't care, right? Like which provider necessarily they do for a lot of customers. Again, asterisks for there may be highly specialized use cases, there might be certain needs, but for me, something like connectivity will generally fail that test. Give me a little bit of a sense of the way you think about that closeness to commodity as a way that you might put another lens on this.
Yeah, it's a great point because I'm I'm the first one who focuses on the margin and the distinctiveness of the offer that you can bring to a customer, and we shouldn't just be me too for 5% cheaper, right? Like that's the last thing I want in anybody's business model. But there I will balance that against, think of it like a four-box matrix where you think of how much margin is in there versus how indispensable is that particular function, right? As an MSP, if the connectivity goes down, the customer's going to call me and go, hey, whoa, you're my MSP and my systems are down. And then I'm going to say, well, you know what? It's the telco. They're the ones who are out. You don't have connectivity. Go and make another telephone call, or else I can't do anything that I get paid for. I don't want to have anybody cut me off at the knees in my ability to deliver services. I would agree with you in the sense that there's very little margin in connectivity services, but there is margin in what I will call the engineer's approach to connectivity services, right? Rule number one in engineering is no single point of failure. So while they may have telco A and somebody else wants to sell telco B for 5% cheaper, I'm going to find a way specialized to their capability, whether it is mobile hotspots, whether it's a private Wi Fi, private 5G, whether it's going to be some overlay that allows me to say, if your primary telco goes down, I have a failover. I have an additional point of redundancy built into my service offering so that even if things get a little bit slower because it's, 4G LTE on a mobile hotspot, that sucks for the CEO or for somebody in finance trying to send and receive large files. I get that that's not ideal, but they will never know that it's not ideal until it is so much better than the alternative. Because the alternative
Right.
is, oh,
Yeah.
we're screwed. We're all out of business here until the connectivity comes back in. That's where I think an MSP can get creative and compelling, because it's not just you have two subscriptions that's called redundancy. It's like, no, we have to design these things to your dysfunction requirements. We have to do test and failover, right? Uh, Disaster recovery is only cool if you can actually use it. So you have to kick the plug out of the wall every now and then and test these systems to make sure that they actually work. That's the value.
Okay.
They could go to somebody else and get that connectivity service for free, essentially zero margin, right? But for me, I'm going to charge 15 points of margin on that because I'm not here just to sell you the connectivity. I'm here to sell you an intelligent service around the connectivity.
Okay, so that's really the difference is the way you've wrapped it and the way that you've kind of given that thinking to it. And for listeners, that is the key differentiator, right? The way I'm talking about is like, hey, I'm just putting a plug and I'm going to manage stuff on top of it. That's where the value. In the cases you're talking about, no, that can add some value to that lower. The joy is they're both right answers. Now, I don't want to linger here too much because I actually want to play with I'm trying a bit out, listeners, and Ryan and I are going to try out the first one of this. So in a way, I'm calling this behind the vendor curtain because what I want to actually do is talk about a vendor move without naming the vendor. The idea here being is that we're going to talk about the theory of why to understand like the upside, the downside, the risks of a particular vendor move without having to cast aspersions or opinions on a particular one. Because what I want you, the service provider listener, is to understand why did they do this so that you can apply it to similar cases. So Ryan, I'm gonna throw for our premier one. I want to get your take. You'll start first, and then we'll explore from here. Talk to me about why a company who owns one or two platforms will start buying up an additional standalone product and then integrate it into their portfolio. In this case, let's use an actual class of products, right? We have a lot of MSP platform companies that are adding backup and disaster recovery. Talk to me what the business strategy is and their thesis of making money.
So I think that in those cases, right, the first thesis is always going to be adjacency, the way that I mentioned. It's going to be the inevitable additional consumption by a customer. If you buy my platform, what else must be purchased with it in order for you to continue to get the value out of the first thing that you agreed to spend money on? In that context, adding backup to an MSP platform, MSP platform exists for your technology and your data and information to always be on, always be accessible. Backup and recovery logically goes in that direction that says, well, all the lights could be on, but that doesn't mean you have access to your databases if you didn't have an accurate and actionable backup in place, right? So adjacency is going to be the first one. The second one is going to be a question of functional enhancement. In other words, I bought somebody that had a new whiz bang that we didn't have in R&D, and they're going to be when I integrate them into my stack of technology, I can now feature function leapfrog the other competitors in the marketplace. And the third one is going to be competitive takeout. Right? Like if and people don't want to admit that this is true, but quite often there are going to be vendors out there who buy a complementary or a competitive piece of technology, not because it's better, not because it expands their portfolio and stickiness with the customer, but because they're losing too many deals to this upstart and they just don't want to fight that fight anymore in the real world. So they buy them and then disappear them, right? There are many large vendors who have done this for years. I see at least those three reasons as a very good idea. But I think you hit on the magic number there, and I want your thoughts on this. If you can integrate it smoothly, rapidly, indistinguishably into your stack, bolt-ons in a package where it's like, this is my platform, and then we bought this one, and we said we integrated it from a marketing logo perspective, but we didn't actually integrate the core or the kernel of the technology. So it still requires two different data sets, different interfaces. If you can't integrate the technology, I don't care what the other rationale is, you're going to make your core product less usable, more painful for the customer, and that's just scoring an own goal that you don't have to do.
So we have the delight of actually being able to disagree a little bit. So by the way, I'm with you in terms of the pure perfection of the world. But let me say that I think there's another piece. So I'm with you in that you've described like the perfect scenario. And I would agree that that is the core why. But there's actually like a little bit more of a subtlety of what they're able to accomplish in the market that I think is worth talking about. So my experience is the other thing that they're doing here is particularly if you've got an established customer base and you're a larger platform vendor. Let's say that you have some 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 customers that you are serving. It is difficult to continue to grow by just selling more new things to that. So you're looking for ways to sell new things to your existing clients. One of the easiest ways to do that is acquire something. You can build it. You can go build new things. That's one way to do it. But you can also buy things. This is the ancillary reason to do it. So you take a vendor who is related to you, as you've kind of outlined, and you say, hey, they only have 1,000 clients. Cool. I have 10,000 or 15,000. If I can buy them and make 5,000 of my clients buy this additional thing, they make money, right? The founders are involved in the success. And I make a whole lot more money because I'm capturing revenue that I didn't have before and I continue to grow. And fundamentally, that's the bit. So in a way, like the thing you talked about, the pure integration, actually just being on the same bill is an integration that the vendor is probably going to be happy with, right? Because, and if you try into this, and I'm with you on like that, the perfection is the way to go, but actually you can make a case of, hey, you don't have to do with two vendors. You have one account manager and it shows up on one bill and there's one support line. Yes, we may route you to Teams, but by the way, we're going to probably route you to Teams no matter what you're doing, right? Right. So that is the basic thesis. Is the I can take something that isn't, that I can make it generate more revenue on its own by exposing it to my customers, and I get more revenue from my customers that I would not have gotten. And that's why there's a certain magic to the way that these acquisitions are happening, just based on that math. A large provider will say, "Hey, there's this smaller thing that if I can put fuel on the fire, it gets a whole lot more. Everybody wins. It's a bigger pie. Those founders come on board." I'm with you on the integration, but I want to get your take, particularly because you advise vendors on these go-to-market strategies. Like, the finance guys are looking at just the bit that I talk about. You're looking at the customer experience. Like, how do you give them guidance on what works here in go-to-market when they are battling both ends of that spectrum?
You make a terrific point because the market reach and that portfolio expansion, I called it adjacency, where it's a cross sell opportunity to grow within your existing install base. Financially, that makes perfectly logical decision. My advice to vendors always, you have to think about this at four levels, right? Number one, is there a market opportunity and is there a complementary overlap that you're going to get those 1,000 to 10,000 customers, right? That expansion opportunity. That's the first thing. If there's not a market, I don't care what the technology is, you should probably just stick to your knitting, right? Number two is, can you actually make the business relationship, the ease of doing business, can you make that actually more interesting? Years ago, I used to completely overlook or just discount the value of everything's on a single invoice, right? Like, I mean, I've been around the cable and connectivity and telecommunications industries, and I've been around networking and cybersecurity, and people would be like, oh, no, no, you can now get these six vendors all on one thing. And I was like, are you kidding me? You think that that's enough value? It turns out, yes, it is, right?
It is.
But it's enhanced when you have that in the overall ease of doing business, same account manager, same invoicing, same certification and tiering process, same kind of business functionality. That's the second level. And if you can do that integration, it is value and it should be something that you can sell the pitch on. Then you have to get to the actual technical integration, and the technical integration is the longest and the most challenging part of the integration. And then if you can get through that thing, then you get to what I will call the ecosystem integration, which is you, your partners, your customers, and all of them being able to speak and understand the same value proposition. There's so many vendors out there. There is a market. They can integrate the ease of doing business. They can integrate the technology, and then it just goes to like a bucket somewhere of things we acquired, but we don't actually sell because we can't convince our team or our partner team or our MSPs out there. Like, nobody is singing on the same song sheet here because it wasn't universally presented as an integrated value proposition to the broader ecosystem. If you can't meet all four of those things, you should probably save yourself suffering, because I mean, you've lived it personally, but you've also observed it many times in the vendor community. Brilliant idea from a market perspective of, I bought this new thing and that's exactly what's going to give me the expansion opportunity. And then we couldn't make the technology function correctly. And it was always, we sell to technical customers through technical channel partners. We're not fooling when you bring out two acquired products that are not integrated at the core code level, and you just say, well, no, I mean, you're just going to go to like a SharePoint portal, and then that's how you're going to access these two different systems. We don't sell to people who are fooled by those things, right?
Right. Right.
We sell to a community that looks at it and goes, oh, okay, so you bolted on something completely incompatible and you made my job harder from a service operations perspective. So many own goals have happened that way when they fail that integration on the technology. Is there a market additive opportunity? Is there a business ease of operations level that you can do? Can you make it functionally work? And then can you integrate the value proposition across the ecosystem? Uh, you, I will say, I think a great idea, and I advise many vendors, especially in the up and coming categories, to do those kinds of tie-ups because they are explosive growth opportunities. But so few of them do it well on all four levels that I find myself biting my tongue more often than you would imagine, where it's like, well, what should we do to double up our growth rate? In my mind, I know you should acquire a player and plug that hole in your solution, and it's going to go like gangbusters through your install base. But then I look at what your track record is for integration and value propositions, and I go, I don't want to be the one who gets blamed for telling
Like
these guys to add one more non integrated thing to the ugly stack.
right. Now, I hope this, we want to give a little bit of insight into the way this process thinks in a generic perspective. If you've got one that you want us to talk about, either throw it in chat or send it in at question@mspradio.com. We will handle it on one of the upcoming versions of this. If you're watching us live, we will definitely take questions right now. Ryan, I want to ask one more area I kind of wanted to talk about with you today a little bit, because I've been thinking a lot about MSP communities and in particular kind of peer groups. I think I can make this broad statement about a lot of communities, but I think this is very relevant to those that are getting together in peer groups. And we talk a lot about the power of peers. I've been involved in peer groups. I know you've been involved in peer groups. Big believer. But one of the things that I've been observing is it seems that there's very much a 3 to 4 year life cycle with participation in peer groups. That in particular, you put people together, they start having a lot of ideas together, and then over a course of roughly 3 to 4 years, they will have extracted at least 80% of the knowledge from one another. And thus, as they're looking for continued ideas and growth, they'll kind of fizzle out for a little bit. Like, one of the secrets of a lot of these peer groups is that there's actually a lot of churn, that there is a roughly 3 or 4 year cycle of churn on that. I kind of wanted to get your take a little bit as somebody, again, we've both been looking at these communities for a while. Is that trend something you're watching, and can you attribute it to something tangible that's happening in these groups?
Yeah, in fact, I think you're spot on with the timeline. And well, spot on in the good cases, right?
Okay,
The
right,
bad cases where you get in and either there's an incompatibility in business model or size, like you're
sure,
500 million and I'm 5 million and we just don't have anything to talk about, right?
right,
If it's done poorly or if there's just a glitch in that system, there are very many times where they churn out in 6 months or less, right? So the half life on a community or on a peer group is not nearly 3 or 4 years, but when it's done correctly, that's about as good as it can get. That's a problem, right? And the reason that I think that that problem occurs is that we are, as you described, learning from each other, not necessarily learning from the vision of people outside of our group. That's the insular nature of you are in a pod, you and 12 or 18 of your peers are going to share information and give advice and hold each other accountable. Right? We're not the only industry that does these kinds of peer groups. There are many out there, young professionals and EOS and other things like that. There's a lot of these peer groups that I believe very strongly provide a rationality sanity check, right? Just that says you're not doing anything dumb in your business. You're running it effectively and you're getting as much out of the existing business model without having to fall on your face to learn the lessons each and every time. Peer groups are a massive accelerator for these guys. The problem is when you look around the room and it's just, well, no, wait, we've talked about everything that you know. We've talked about everything that I know. What else is there? There has to be like a challenger level. There has to be that early adopter piece of the peer group that says, by the way, these are emerging technologies. These are complementary business models. These are fundamental failures in your existing business model. They're going to show up in 5 years and you didn't see it because you're inside the machine. Somebody else needs to point that stuff out to you. So whether that's facilitated in a peer group in the format of guest lecturers, right? outside voices who come in periodically and go woohoo and shake the trees and try to make people think differently, or whether that is kind of a permanent guide, that a Sherpa in the environment, not one of the peers, but a leader who says, I see what you're all talking about over here, and you're getting too comfortable. Let's stretch you in a particular direction. If you don't have those things, the best case scenario for peer group value proposition is 3 to 4 years. And then you just look around and it's like I said earlier with the portfolio expansion. Like, cool, I'm totally satisfied. I got everything from this that you promised. This is real value, and I feel better because I did it. But I'm not
So
going to get anything else. I'm
why
going to
is the
stick.
experience different? Why is the experience different on boards? Like if I think about like the parallel to a peer group in like a larger corporate environment is board of directors, and you don't see necessarily this 3 to 4 year churning in the same way at the board of directors, but they have some thematic of the same things, holding people accountable, reporting, like that. So what do you, as you analyze this, like what's the difference between what a board of directors is doing versus what a peer group is doing?
I think it boils down to the fundamentals of a fiduciary responsibility.
Okay.
Peers give each other advice, but if it works or it doesn't work, it's more on you. It's not on me. As a member of a board of directors, if I give you advice that has negative impact on the share value, on the earnings, on the overall trajectory and value of the business, I can be asked to leave, right? Like that is, I cannot do it for my own best interest. I can't just a passive, I mean, if it gets better, it gets better for you, that's fine. I
Right.
exist for the purpose of being your fiduciary in your financial best interest, insisting that you do the things that will be the best for the overall value of your entity. That's not present in a peer group. And because it's that casual, it's people, they'll try. Everybody's enthusiastic in the beginning. And like you, I've known just dozens of people who are super contributors in communities that they have good ideas. They always want to participate. They're bringing value. That's great. But if there's too much resistance or if it's just not working out the way that they thought, it's just way too easy to kind of just drift away and not take this thing as seriously. I think there's some peer groups that are fixing that, right? Some of them outside of our industry. I've not yet seen it here within the channel space, but outside, I am seeing those where you're getting a blend between you are peers, but you have a contractual obligation, and if you don't live up to it, there are financial penalties. I think that's exactly the right way to go.
Well, we've identified a new area for potential innovation here. Ryan, you and I can riff on this stuff all day long, but in the interest of both your time and the listeners' time, I'm going to wrap us up here. If people are interested in asking follow-up questions to you directly or getting in touch, what's the best way for them to do that?
Best way for me is on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/, Ryan Morris 303, right? Like that's the place where I do most of my interactive conversations. If it gets deep and serious beyond that, we'll get on email, but let's start with LinkedIn.
Look, or have them. We'll all get on here and talk next time on a live show. Ryan, these are
Exactly.
always great fun. Thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to preview an upcoming interview. I spoke with Jonathan D. Ryan. He's the co founder and CEO of Nutrient, and we delved into the evolving landscape of AI driven document intelligence and workflow automation. And he spoke about highlighting its potential for business processes. He discussed with me the balance between human accountability and mission automation and emphasized how innovative technologies can focus on efficiency while addressing the challenges of integrating AI into those traditional workflows. Here's a preview of that interview. Now, I want to break through a little bit of the hype, and in particular, I know you've warned against the vanity projects in AI. Let's make that concrete for me. I'm sure you've got one or two really great examples of things that you can do now that you couldn't do before. Can you give me one or two of those?
Yeah, the perfect example is AI data extraction. We have a product, we call it AI data processing, but it's in our workflow space. And this is the classic, it's a RAG system, you know it. Like I need to put all my documents in a directory or point to a directory, right? I need to have most of that data structured so that I can associate, I don't know, phone number, IBAN, bank account, right? First name, last name. It needs to be structured. So the actual data needs to be groomed and processed to be structured. And now all of a sudden I ask questions and it can answer in a large data set. It can summarize things. It can tell me various things. We have people that are using it for that, as well as, I know this sounds really simple because in our workflow product, we're really competing against paper here still. That's what people don't understand. Uh, and so just basic things like, I don't know, vendor onboarding. I hand my vendor a paper form, or they print out the form and write on it and then send it back to me as an image. And now I need someone to enter in the data, right? Well, now with AI and the combination of an algorithmic and AI approach, I can literally just visually look, give it the form and it automatically connects the data into my system. That's a person that does that currently at a lot of governments, a lot of enterprises, a lot of places. So that's the most concrete example. Other examples of it, I would tell you, are like redaction is a common use case, and you've seen it. It used to be, and you have this world of PII or data security matters now. Well, in an algorithmic approach, I need to tell you every single thing to look for that's considered secure data or it's considered private information. And now in AI, I can just say redact private information, and it understands the context of that word private so they can do it. So we've seen these use cases, translations and other summarizations and other querying, the common ones that I think both in, especially in the workflow space, are coming in. They think it's magic still, to be frank.
We love things that are magic, but more importantly, we're looking for ways that are use cases we can apply for customers. My Patreons already have this interview now if you want to get access to it right away. It's a benefit of supporting the show. Visit patreon.com/MSP Radio to sign up and get access right away. The interview will drop on my YouTube channel and podcast feed this weekend. Now, I want to thank Sales Builder, our Patreon sponsor, whose support makes this show possible. Focus on your IT sales workflow with the power of automation and visit them at salesbuilder.com. That's BUILDR.com. Vendors, you too can get your name mentioned on the live show. It's a simple monthly subscription. Visit patreon.com/MSP Radio to learn more. And listeners, here's what you can do to help me out. Make sure you like, share, and follow on your favorite platforms. If you're liking us on YouTube or watching us on YouTube right now, hit that like button. Make sure you have subscribed. It really is the number one thing you can do to help the show. If you want to support directly on Patreon, we've got a give what you want model. You set what you think the content is worth, and you get access to videos early, as well as a private link for one-on-ones with me if you've got any questions you want us to answer. If you want them answered here on the show, send an email in at question@mspradio.com. We'll answer it live on the show, and I certainly do answer comments in the YouTube videos and descriptions. Thanks for joining me today for the Business of Tech Lounge, and I will see you next time.